You ever wonder how some of history's greatest thinkers, thousands of miles apart, somehow came up with the exact same big ideas at the exact same time? Well, we're going to dive into a really fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty wild theory that tries to explain exactly that.
And look, this isn't just some small coincidence. It's a huge historical puzzle, one that has seriously stumped scholars for ages. It's like a synchronized global awakening that, when you really think about it, just doesn't seem possible. The explanation we're going to look at from our source material, well, let's just say it's probably not what you're expecting.
Okay, so first things first, let's really get a handle on the puzzle itself. We're talking about a period in history known as the Axial Age.
So, between about the 8th and 3rd centuries BCE, something incredible happened. In the grand scheme of history, this is actually a pretty short window of time. But in that window, this massive wave of intellectual and spiritual breakthroughs just swept across the entire planet. And as far as we can tell, they all happened totally independently.
I mean, just think about the scale of this for a second. In China, you've got Confucius and Lao Tzu. Over in India, you have the Buddha and the Upanishad sages. Then in Persia, there's Zoroaster. In the Levant, the great Jewish prophets. And way over in Greece, Socrates, Plato, and Heraclitus. All of these absolute giants of human thought popped up, separated by huge deserts, massive mountains, entire oceans, and there is zero, and I mean zero evidence that they ever talked to each other. Not a single letter, not a single messenger.
And here's where it gets really strange. It's not just that they were all thinking deep thoughts at the same time. It's that their core ideas were so similar. They were all talking about things like nonviolence, ethics, the idea that your actions have consequences, kind of like karma, and this deep desire to free the soul. I mean, how does that even happen?
You know, conventional history doesn't really have a great answer for this. But this is where the source material we're looking at puts a truly radical idea on the table. It's an explanation rooted in ancient Jain philosophy, designed to explain this seemingly impossible connection.
Okay, so the whole theory really hangs on this one concept, Divya Dhvani. The best way to think about it is like a cosmic spiritual broadcast. Imagine a divine, universal sound that's just pulsing with pure wisdom. But here's the key part. It's not in any language. It's more like a vibration, something that any living being can hear and just instantly understand in their own way.
So, according to this theory, the source of this entire cosmic broadcast, the thing that kicked off this whole global awakening, it wasn't some big historical trend or a social movement. Nope. It was the enlightenment of just one person, Mahavira, the 24th Tirthankara in Jainism. And this divine sound, this broadcast, it's said to have come from a place called the Samavasarana. Jain texts describe this place as, well, it's not just a building. It's this huge, almost otherworldly structure. It was basically the divine stage where Mahavira, right after he achieved total omniscience, delivered his very first sermon to the entire universe.
All right, so if we're talking about a cosmic broadcast, how did it actually work? Well, the theory lays out a pretty clear and honestly fascinating process.
It all starts with Mahavira's personal enlightenment. That's step one. From that state of total knowledge, he then sends out the Divya Dhvani. And get this, it doesn't just travel across the earth, it goes through all the cosmic realms. We're talking heavens, earth, and even the hells. And then the final, most important step. Everyone, and I mean everyone, humans, animals, gods, you name it, they hear it and instantly get it. The wisdom just clicks.
And that right there is the core of the whole idea. This telepathic broadcast is pitched as the missing link. It's the mechanism that could finally explain how those thinkers were all on the same page, despite the huge distances. They didn't have to meet, they didn't need to write letters, because they were all, in a sense, listening to the same cosmic whisper.
Okay, so that's the theory. It's a big one for sure. But what about the evidence? Let's take a look at how the source actually tries to connect the dots between all these different philosophies and that one single originating voice.
So when you actually lay out the core teachings of all these major figures, the source argues that a really clear pattern starts to show up. You've got ethical conduct in China, the idea of liberating the soul in Greece, moral choice in Persia, and the argument is that the parallels to core Jain principles are just too strong, too consistent to be a coincidence.
But the theory really hones in on one person in particular as its sort of smoking gun. The one figure who they claim offers the most compelling proof of this whole cosmic connection, and that's Pythagoras.
I mean, just look at this comparison. The source points to the similarities between Mahavira's vows and the practices of Pythagoras and his followers as its strongest piece of evidence. And we're not talking about vague ideas here. We're talking about super specific stuff. Strict nonviolence, strict vegetarianism, and even an inner circle of monks who practiced nudity, which is incredibly similar to the sky-clad monks of Jainism, the Digambaras. The source basically asks, how on earth could such specific, identical practices pop up thousands of miles apart if there wasn't some kind of transmission?
So after going through all that, what's the big takeaway here? What does this perspective really tell us about history?
Well, what it really does is it invites us to think completely differently about where spiritual wisdom comes from. It suggests that maybe we shouldn't see all these great traditions as totally separate inventions. Maybe they're more like interconnected echoes of one single eternal truth. Just different flavors of the same core insight.
Yeah, so the big point here is that this theory takes a really confusing historical puzzle, this synchronized awakening, and it turns it into this beautiful story about universal connection. It makes you wonder if maybe humanity's greatest spiritual moments are way more connected than we ever thought possible.
And that leaves us with one last pretty big question to chew on. And it's not just about history, but about where big ideas come from in the first place. What if the greatest ideas in human history weren't actually invented by brilliant people, but instead were received?